Can everyone hear me okay? Is that all good?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for attending. Really appreciate it. I'm Jack. I'm an HCPC registered sports psychologist. Over the last kind of 8 years, I've been working in academy football. And today I'm just going to give you kind of an insight from my own experience of how I've applied practical psychology into the academy football environment. And just to give you an insight about a few practical suggestions that I would suggest for coaches and practitioners alike. Also, just to give you an insight into what this very nuanced and unique experience and environment looks like for a sports psychologist working within this sport. So here we go. So the aims of the talk today, again, just to gain an insight into applied psychology within academy football. It's incredibly complex, it's relatively new, and it's something that football clubs are really trying to bring to the forefront of a multidisciplinary team. I'm then going to offer the applied recommendations for coaches and practitioners moving forward to enhance that provision within their environment themselves, but also for early career practitioners to really gain that insight into what it takes to become a good practitioner within that environment. I think it's really important from my own experiences to learn how to bridge the gap between theory and practice. I think we're heavily related to the theoretical underpinning of our work when we're going throughout our formal training. So whether that be your MSc or QSEP or the BASIS pathway, nor do we then relate that how we would take that into the practice going forward. So I think that's something that I'll really try and highlight today. And then lastly, I'll open the room to questions and answers if you may have them. So just wanted to give you an idea of the journey that I've had within football so far and how that's ignited my passion going forward. I started at Southampton Solent, who had very good links to Southampton Football Club, and I was able to capitalise on that and be part of a Category 1 environment very early on within my career, and that really fueled and ignited a real passion within sports psychology that I didn't really know I had until I had that opportunity. And I think being a footballer myself back in the day, I think I tried to work in professional football and I didn't know how quite I could do that. And I think once you're in that environment, you can see the impact you can have and how much sports science is moving forward and the integration of psychology within that environment. I think each and every one of you that wants to go into it, once you're in there, you don't really want to leave. I then moved on to obviously starting my QSET process, stage 2 training, where I was positioned at Luton Town Football Club in a voluntary position for about 3 seasons, and then was lucky enough to be made part-time there for the 4th season I was there. And that kind of worked my whole way through my training program and offered me a real safe space to experiment, make mistakes, and learn a lot about the culture and how football works, really, because it's a very nuanced and very complex environment that's different to any other that I've worked in across all different sports. I've recently taken up a role at Portsmouth Football Club, so I'm the lead sports psychologist there. I've been there for about 8 months now. It's absolutely fantastic, a really historic club that really wants to drive people forward and utilise sports psychology to benefit the players and transition into first team football. And then I've kind of now moved into just full-time applied practice within football, so 3 days a week at Portsmouth, and then also now working and consulting at West Ham with the PDP, which is the professional development phase, so 18s and 23s. So that's kind of my journey so far, and this will help you understand how my experiences have been shaped to date, and hopefully how this presentation will move forward. So just to give you a little bit of background of sports psychology in football and how that has moved forward in the last 20 years, the FA, the Premier League and the EFL have obviously combined to create the Elite Player Performance Programme, the EPPP, where psychology has become an integral part of that. I think some would suggest that it's a bit of a tick box exercise at the moment. And when you look at the 4 corner model of TAC, Tech, Phys and psychosocial, I think we could all agree of the people that have worked in football, I think the psychological quadrant is heavily underappreciated and also underutilized, and we don't support that enough to fundamentally make it part of every program that we deliver within academy football in England. And I think that's definitely changing. I think there's been numerous jobs out there at the moment. I think of Southampton, there's been Portsmouth, West Ham, Tottenham, Arsenal, that have all started to really integrate either a full-time member of staff or part-time sports psychologist with the right credentials to do so. Excuse me. So I think another factor is that there's a huge negative perception of sports psychology. I think that hugely stems from poor psychological support provided historically within the environment. I think within football, it's been plagued with charlatans and people that don't have the right credentials to work within this environment and make the impact that they say they can. So without the right training, without the right supervision, without the right salient experience within sport of football specifically, the impact you're going to have and the progress you make and the impact you have on those perceptions is then going to be really, really weakened. And I think the more we can get supervised trainees and also qualified practitioners into these environments from an early stage, that's when psychology has become more respected, more utilized, and then it's going to benefit the players in our care. I think also from a coaching perspective, we have limited exposure to sports psychology throughout the coaching badges. So I know the FA have certain modules within their syllabuses, and I know on the UEFA badges it's similar, but it's still not enough. The understanding that coaches have just purely based on their coaching badges isn't enough for them to trust and want sports psychology to be integrated within the environment. So the reason why I touched on that is because I think to give early practitioners and coaches alike a real insight into the barriers that I've experienced as a sports psychologist, I think it's really interesting to see both sides of the coin. For me, coaches are the gatekeepers. They are the people that have autonomy. They are incredibly experienced and talented individuals with a lot of experience, a wealth of aptitude. And I think those are the people that you really need to tap into to make sports psychology at the forefront of every program. Those coaches have the ability to dictate times, lunch schedules, training sessions, session design, and that's where you really get the tangible element of psychology. And that's a point I'd like to move on to. In a world in sports psychology, in football especially, you're in an MDT, a multidisciplinary team where physios, analysis, strength and conditioning have really tangible ways of showing their output or showing their work. Sports psychology needs to be the same. You're in a world where you're constantly up against data, so you need to show how tangible psychology can be brought into the environment itself to really kind of negate the earlier challenges that sports psychology might face. You also need to understand the language in football. Language is a massive element of how I've been able to implement sports psychology across kind of 4 different clubs I've worked at. You need to understand the different words coaches are using, even the players in the changing rooms, the cafeteria. You need to understand that language, because otherwise you can't access their dialogue, and that's really, really important. You need the contextual understanding of football. It doesn't make you a better practitioner. It makes you more accessible and more applicable to that environment. And that's a really important point. I think you can be a fantastic practitioner within football without understanding the game, but I just think it really, really gives you a better chance of succeeding. I always talk about the 3 R's, and if there's one thing I want you to take away from today's session, it would be this: relationships. In order to build the rapport, build the relationships, and then earn the respect, that's how you get sports psychology into a football environment, and I will stand on that hill very much so. Also, always try and understand the club values and culture that you're walking into. Every sports psychology program will be different to the club that you're in, and it's essential that you understand those values and culture before trying to take on the whole world and solve every problem. Get those fundamentals right first and set yourself a really strong foundation for behavioral change and cultural organizational movements forward. So psychology in action. So this for me is pivotal. We need to make sure as practitioners, and also to showcase to coaches, how we can make psychology accessible but also really impactful. So what I would always suggest is have a really strong theoretical underpinning. I'm really swaying towards the use of ACT. I know many people on this call will be familiar with that theoretical underpinning at the moment. It's kind of this third cognitive behavioral wave of psychotherapy and of psychology, really. And I think I would always, whatever philosophical beliefs and foundations that one would have, always start off with that. That's where your really strong theoretical underpinning is then going to be able to drive your practice and session delivery forward to make sure that's integrated within an environment. So, for example, I have 3 core pillars that I use within a football environment, and this is probably more salient to Portsmouth, where I'm at the moment, and it's taken the whole time that I've been there to even get this started for the new season. So I look at diffusion, so that emotional regulation element, how we cope with pressure and how we deal with those moments within a game, but also off the pitch as well. How can we expect? I think John did a fantastic job of articulating the release process within football. It's a massive part. We know that 98% of those players will never play a minute of professional football, and that's in a Category 1 environment. So thinking about the Category 2s, Cat 3s, Cat 4s, there's a huge amount of players who will never, ever, ever be able to access that top level of professional football. So they need to understand themselves. They need to be really taking in that present moment and making sure they're getting the most out of it. How they deal with pressure and mistake and failure is also really pivotal. And then also that commit. So for me, commitment is all about using our values to understand what we're actually doing there. What's our why? What's our purpose within academy football? Is it to develop as a person? Is it to develop as a footballer? I would argue it's to do both. And then that then moves on to how you then implement it within a practice session, i.e. how can I offer coaches a real tangible way to utilize those 3 core pillars within a training session. So what I would do is I look at the triggers, which is, I call them that A, B, C process. Triggers looks at the situation. So how can we kind of manipulate a situation to elicit certain thoughts, feelings, and then behaviors to showcase certain psychological attributes. So for example, if you're playing in a small-sided game, how can you expose players to more 1v1 situations that would actually make them make mistakes and expose them to failure a lot more of the time? Then you can then have the psychological support you need from a psychologist to then go, well, this is what we need to do. So behaviors, how can I expose coaches to different environments where they know what the obvious, so the overt behaviors are, but also the covert ones? What about the young player that's not really engaging with the session? What are the reasons behind that? Why is he or she behaving in that way? And also the consequences. So what's the outcome? What's the payoff? And what are the costs of those behaviors within that environment? I think that's a really simple but also accessible way that gets really tangible outputs within a football environment. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an insight into how I structure programs and also access that delivery at certain points as well. These are just, I'm not going to run through all of these. Adam, I know I'm close to time already, but these are some of the different delivery and provision that I provide both on and off the pitch, and feel free to take a screenshot of this, but this is just a brief understanding of those different principles and things that I do to support coaches, but also to support players, the MDT, and also parents as well. So in summary, guys, kind of just 2 key takeaway points for the coaches, but also practitioners as well. I would really, really promote the use of psychology if you're a coach. So if you have any questions after this, please ask, and please do reach out to qualified professionals to ensure that psychology is threaded throughout your program. Don't be scared of it. It's not there to encroach on your job. It's not to add to your workload. It's something that I think me personally, I'm really passionate about bringing sports psychology at the forefront of everything we do. Also, as Kurt Lewis famously said, every behavior has a function. So whether that's the personality of that player, whether it's the environment that player is placed in, try and understand them. Try and understand your players to the best of your ability to make really guided and conscious decisions about how you treat that individual. And then lastly, for practitioners, so always use an evidence-based approach. We are constantly scrutinized as psychologists for it being a soft science, for it being something that's just a bit fluffy, is constantly something that I'm referred to as a sports psychologist. Make it evidence-based, make it practical, make it impactful. That's one of my big suggestions for practitioners. Otherwise, you're not going to get the buy-in. And then lastly, the 3 R's: build rapport, enhance relationships and make them professional, but also personal, and then really build that respect from the people that you have. within your environment. So thank you, everyone. Thanks very much for listening. Hopefully it's given you an insight into what sports psychology can look like on the coalface, and please feel free to ask any questions.
Brilliant, excellent. Thank you very much for that, Jack. And it's clear to see the passion you got for sports psychology and football and development of athletes. I think that's really, really clear to see for everyone. Thank you for that. So any questions? So we've probably got time just for 1 or 2 questions for Jack. So I'll offer it out to anybody. So any questions that you got? Okay. I've got a question for you, Jack. Right, I wrote 3 down, but which one shall I ask? Okay. You actually talked about the qualifications and being HCP registered and getting that level of credibility and qualification behind you. I think as a sports psychologist. What benefits have you seen through your own practice through going through those qualifications, and how has that potentially helped your career instead of going down an academic route like some people do and maybe don't get that HCPC registration with them? Have you seen big benefits to that, or has it helped you just tick a box in order to then get your foot through the door?
Yeah, I think it's a really important point to talk about, Adam, and something I'm really passionate about is enhancing people's understanding of what it actually takes to become a chartered sports psychologist. And that doesn't mean that trainees aren't going to be incredibly valuable within those environments. I think they are. I was a trainee myself, but I think the key for me is good supervision. If you don't have that really balanced and also high level of expertise supporting you throughout that qualification, you don't get as much out of it. So I was very lucky to be supervised by 2 fantastic sports psychologists, and also to be part of a peer supervision group. So I would suggest if anyone's looking to go into either the BASIS pathway or the BPS, I think making really strong decisions and bold decisions who you're supervised by offers you a fantastic way to not only gain the theoretical understanding and underpinning first, but then to really push forward and then access those applied environments with really strong practitioner skills, basically.
Brilliant, excellent. Yeah, thank you for that, Jack. So I think Tamer's got a question.
Yes, thank you. Just I'm talking about football. It seems that the understanding or the importance of psychology, mental strength, resilience, it seems that the awareness is rising. You hear a lot of coaches, massive coaches in football, talking about mentality. I don't know, club saying monster mentality, Real Madrid winning the Champions League so many times in a short space of time, and talking about the psychological strength in that team. I wonder, do the coaches or the coaching teams know it's important but feel they have enough when maybe they actually don't? Or do you think? I'm just wondering, because it seems the awareness is rising, but at the same time, the message I'm getting is it's not appreciated enough. If that makes sense.
Yeah, Tamer, it's a fantastic point. So some of the best coaches in the world in themselves do fantastic psychological work, and why I put such a over reliance on this presentation of relationships and building that rapport is because half the time what I'm doing is not groundbreaking with players or coaches. I always say psychology is just common sense that's actually used frequently, and I think some of the best coaches at the moment are starting to really gain a deeper insight into how sports psychology can impact the wider organizational culture, but also then impact one-to-one coaching support and also player development as well. I think if I give you an example at Portsmouth and West Ham, I think some of the younger coaches are way more accepting of sports psychology, which I don't think you'd be too surprised to hear. And some of the more experienced coaches that have been professionals themselves, they're of the mindset of, well, I didn't need sports psychology, so why is it necessary now? And I think that is slowly changing. And I think my job as I've gone into West Ham is to try and change those ideologies and change those kind of ideas. But it's a process, and yeah, I think you've got it spot on. It's a work in progress, and people are trying to understand it a little bit more and access it as well.
Great. And the coaches themselves might need coaches, referees. I know people focus on football players, or athletes in general. But what about that? Yeah, the coaches, obviously they come under a lot of pressure to perform, to achieve. And obviously you've got 25, 30 people in a team, looking up to you when things are going wrong. So that's a lot of pressure. Same with referees. Is there any kind of direction to focus on them as well?
Yeah, the referees have their own set of sports psychologists. There's actually been a job recently posted there at the PGMO. So yeah, the referees get a lot of psychological support, and rightly so, because they're in the spotlight a huge amount of the time, and they make massive decisions under the finest margins. But I would say most of my work is predominantly with coaches. I think people are under the illusion that it's a lot of one-to-one sessions with players, but within football, you work with coaches to then access better behaviours and outcomes for your team, essentially. And I think that's where the cultural and organizational psychology and systemic practice is hugely important within the football environment.
Thanks, Jack. Great. Thank you.
No worries, Tamer. Have a good one.
Thanks, Tamer. We've got one more question, but I'll ask you if you could try and answer it super quick. Really? So, because it's a good question, but Ryan's asking, how do you manage to work effectively across two football environments at the same time?
Very interesting one. Again, really, really succinctly, relationships have actually allowed me to do that. Portsmouth trust me to work along two-sided clubs, and also West Ham wanted to bring someone in with the experience of working across a lot of football clubs. So again, just to put it bluntly, I work 3 days a week at Portsmouth, 2 days a week at West Ham, a 3 days a week contract, and then a consultancy role for West Ham. So it's about balancing when you can do certain things and where you can make the most impact within that environment. It's challenging, but it's also really rewarding. Excellent,
brilliant. Okay, that was fabulous and great to hear these talks from you guys around football academies in particular. Excellent. So we just run out of time. Thanks again for our speakers. You can ask them any questions, I'm sure, throughout the day. So I'll stop the recording there, guys, and we'll go back to the main room, and then there's going to be an interview session with an athlete as well. So that'll be in 2 or 3 minutes. All right. Thanks again, Jack.
Cheers, Adam. Thank you very much.
Thank you.